Welcome to Backstage with Becca B with special guest Ioana Alfonso. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Backstage with Becca B. On this episode, she has shared the stage with artists like Jennifer Lopez and Ricky Martin. She made her Broadway debut as an original cast member in Wicked, was in 9 to 5 on Broadway, was an associate director for Kenny Leon's Top Dog Underdog on Broadway, and her most recent work includes Bob Fosse's Dancing on Broadway. Please welcome Ioana Alfonso. How are you? Thank you for joining me. And first of all, I have to say I am so heartbroken about your current show. I talked to Tony last week.
Yeah.
And I just it deserves more attention. Like the incredible dancers that they put on stage in one show. Like, you all are Broadway, I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely we are heartbroken as well. It's a lot of work. And it's been over a year of getting it to this place. So it's always really sad, but I think this one is particularly sad because I think it just shows how easily dance can get overlooked,
Yep.
um, and how we are getting to a place in our theater culture where I think we are kind of worshiping celebrity to a degree
Oh, definitely.
and only paying attention to um, like shiny things like and this is not a commentary on the other not the people who were nominated
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
being deserving or not. They're certainly deserving. It's just that I feel like the committee maybe didn't see um, what we see and what a lot of people see and what the dance community sees. Um, so yeah, so it's just it's heartbreaking, and these are some of the most special people I've ever worked with. Um, and I think that Fosse's material is um, really complex and a joy to work on. So it's sad. It's very sad, and I hope that this doesn't um, affect how these types of shows come to
So,
Broadway in the future. I hope that producers are not scared to do it again, or that it doesn't influence decision makers to shy away from doing work like this. Because we're kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again on Broadway right now, and I think that
and
has
it's a
to,
lot of revivals and stuff right now, and it's
yeah. But also, revival is done in the exact same way,
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
same show, different costume kind of a thing, at least from my perspective. And again, not to diminish what people are doing, I just think that I really believe that the talent, and that means everybody from the producers to the directors to the performers to the creatives, there's so much talent that can do more. And I hope that uh, the theater industry really starts to shift a little bit
Me
in
too.
terms of taking some chances and building things that are different and new and thought-provoking. And so, um, yeah, that's where my brain is right now. I'm trying to process that thought process. Like, I just want it to have a place. I want our type of show to
Yes.
have space. And I've been around for a really long time, so I've done a lot of things, and sometimes you are a part of projects that you kind of get an inkling. You're like, well, we didn't succeed at this. And sometimes that happens. This is not that. Like, I don't feel that way about this show. I think that this show
Challenge.
is really fun, is really excellent. Everyone that comes to see it is um, gives nothing but positive feedback in a genuine way, because that's the thing too. Like, people come and sometimes they blow smoke, but it feels very genuine, and I know that people have been very moved and they've seen themselves on that stage, and we've made a point of putting a lot of diversity out there and having people be seen, dancers be seen and front and center, which I think is very important. Um,
With the
so
lights in the back too.
right, right. So,
Yeah.
so I think that that deserves to continue. So I hope that it does.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And like you all act through dance, which is incredible. You all do stuff a lot of people can't. Like a lot of actors are like, well, I don't know if I can do the dance part that well.
Right,
And
but also
well,
we
both.
act with words and we sing. So it's not
Yeah.
just dance, which I think is the point of the play, right? Is
It's
that like
yeah,
we can do
everything.
multiple things, and it's a beautiful thing to celebrate and important for the community to recognize. I think we're a
Oh my
long way from
gosh,
there.
yes.
Unfortunately, I think that a lot of work needs to be done to celebrate the
For sure.
people that normally get to only sit in the background. So,
They get overshadowed
yeah,
for sure.
undervalued as well. Yeah.
Which like is heartbreaking. You all are the core of Broadway, honestly, in my opinion.
Mm, I agree.
Yeah, Broadway can't happen without you all.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna get back into dancing later,
Yeah.
but first of all, your resume and your biography is insane, and I wish I had like 5 hours to discuss it. So, have you always known you wanted to be a performer? And when was the moment you realized that you did?
I've never really thought about this question until recently, when they've been asking it a lot during press. Um, I don't know that there was really like a moment where I was like, this is like my future necessarily. I have been picking one moment when I moved to Miami. I was born in New York City, and that's a long story, but I was born in New York City. I lived in the Dominican Republic for about a year, and then my
Oh,
parents got divorced, and then I moved to Puerto Rico, and then I lived in Puerto Rico till I was about maybe 10 or 11, right? And so I started in Puerto Rico at the National Ballet School there, which was run by some like Russian expats. And it was a beautiful, very sweet, like no air conditioning, romantic, like studio building, like on a hill. And like, downstairs, down the hill, there were like training Paso Fino horses. And like, it was just like this beautiful thing.
wow.
And I just remember it as being this kind of, I don't know, as a young girl, like a magical like place where I could hear this beautiful music, and there were flowers everywhere, and the ballerinas were like, the company would be rehearsing whatever, Giselle, and they would be in their like rehearsal tutus and point shoes and whatever. And so like I remember being kind of enamored by that. I also took these classes with my best friend. So like there was that
Yeah.
idea. I was getting really good training because just serendipitously, because it was the National Ballet and it was run by these Russian ballerinas, like I was getting good training. I was initially put in there by my mom because my family, my dad especially, like has we call it for fun like Swadicus Bacticus, but it's like a sway back. Um, and she wanted to like make sure that my
Oh,
posture was better than that. And so I started that way, but and then it was like really magical and I loved it. But then when I was 10 or 11 and we moved to Miami, it wasn't something that I necessarily like carried with me in terms of like I think that I was in love with like the process of it and the environment and my friendships and all of that more than I was necessarily looking at it from the perspective of like dance being something that like was possible for me. Um, I was super young, so I just wasn't thinking in that way. And then when we moved to Miami, my parents were busy doing other things and moving us around. And so like a year or so went by, I think, before we went to, this is the moment that I've been bringing up a lot that I had to think about because I had totally forgotten about it, but we went to this like, I feel like it was like a festival of some kind or something, and I think it was in a place in Miami called Bayside, which is where they hold all these like outdoor events and stuff like that.
Oh my
There
gosh,
was a
that's so fun.
stage, and they had like all these, things going on. And I remember seeing a dance company there. Um, I don't remember what it was called at the time, but it was Mia Michaels' like company, and she was like an up and coming like young choreographer. And I do remember watching that and saying, I want to do that, like whatever that is. Um, because I felt like it was so electric and I just loved it. And so I do remember that. And then my mom just kind of asked around to anybody that she knew in this like new city, what studio, like what's the best studio, where should she go? And so we went to a studio. And as my mom was talking to the receptionist, who I later found out was Mia's mom,
Oh,
because they owned the studio, I looked into like the studio had two studios like back to back, but you had to go through one studio to get to the back studio. And so in the reception area, there was just one
everything
door,
passageway.
and the door was open. And I looked in and I saw Mia, and I was like, ah, this is it. Like, this is the place. This is where we need to be.
It's meant to be.
Um, yeah. And so I ended up going there. And then that, like, I don't believe in coincidences necessarily. Like, then I ended up then Mia became Mia Michaels, the choreographer. But before that, we were studying with her, and, she basically took me under her wing at a very young age. So I studied with her there. I mentored with her there. They became basically like family to us. They would pick us up from school, like, and so I grew up in that environment that later became uh, sort of like the catalyst for everything else that happened after that. Like that's how I got into the art school because Mia thought it was a good idea and she helped me get in, and I would assist her in the summers when I was very young. So I started, around 15, and we would go around, the country and the world, and then I joined her company, and then I went to NYU. So I think that that is the moment I would say was like the trigger point that kind of sped off from there. But I don't know that I had a moment in that time where I had sort of like that reflection of like, oh, this is what I'm doing. It was just kind of,
Like, this is fun.
it was like I'm here and I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna keep doing it like until I don't love it. But I don't know that I thought to myself until much later when I had to decide whether or not I was going to college. I think that's the moment that I was like, okay, am I doing this as a thing, or like what am I doing?
Yeah, like, what is this? Do I want
Yeah.
to study
And so
this?
I made that choice, but it was more like a practical choice. Like, am I going to school or am I not going to school? Am I dancing or am I not dancing? So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's kind of like a very vague. I know some other people have moments where they're like, ah, I saw this movie and like that was it. I don't know that I
Yes.
have that necessarily, but I did have that one moment that kind of like triggered other moments.
Well, I feel like just like watching people on stage, you get inspiration from those other people, and you're like, that is so cool what these like older kids are doing. I
Right.
want to be like them.
Right.
Yeah, which is so cool. And also, I was gonna say when you were like talking about deciding about college, I'm like, it's always crazy to me because you're deciding all this at 18 or like 17 and 16, and you're still a kid at that point.
Oh, 100%.
And you're
Yeah.
deciding what you want to do for the rest of your life at that moment, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like that's the like, I guess I think people are like taking their time a little more now,
Yeah.
but it's so rushed
I
for
also tell people that, it doesn't have to be forever. It's like, I think there's this pressure to say, like, this is what you're going to do forever.
Yeah.
Like, well, you don't have to. It's just like what makes your heart sing right now. Because as long as you follow what makes your heart sing and what makes you feel like that electricity or that like that vibration, that's going to lead you to what you need to do. And sometimes life, what I've learned now that I'm a little older is that life kind of takes you. I had no intention of being on Broadway, like it wasn't on my radar like at all. Um but life just kind of does that, and as long as you're doing the thing that you love, the thing that you love might turn out to be something different. So you could follow, in my case, let's say like I could follow the dancer path, but the dancer path could have led me to med school. I mean, you don't really know, right? Like it, but as long as you follow that, I feel like that's where you belong in the moment, and the things that you learn from whatever path you take are very much related to your next path. So, I work with a director, Kenny Leon, who um, is incredible, and you would never know that, like, he's actually a lawyer. Like, he went to law
Oh
school.
my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, and I have friends that like went to school for communications or whatever, and they ended up so it just or vice versa. They start out in dance and they end up somewhere else. So I think that that's a really good point, and and important to like take the pressure off if you are that age and choosing things, that there's no definitive anything. You can change your mind at any moment and it is okay.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
In fact,
You're
I
always
recommend,
learning.
yeah, changing your
Yeah.
mind is totally fun.
Yeah. And you draw new inspiration from like things you see in the world every day.
Right.
Yeah. So before I get into Broadway and like what led you to Broadway and your Broadway debut, which huge show teaser, but I want to talk about so you've done a ton of dance stuff and I couldn't narrow a question down to just like one particular thing on your resume. So I wanted to ask, is there a particular non-Broadway piece of choreography that has been your favorite, like ever, and why?
Wow, that's a really good question. Non-Broadway piece. There are so many. There are really so many that I admire. So I don't know that I can narrow it down to one like particular one,
You
but
can
I
pick
can but I can
multiple.
tell you, yeah, I can tell you um I love William Forsythe's work, and always have. I think it's exciting and innovative and really beautiful. And I had the privilege of learning some when I was at NYU, and it was just, I like things that are challenging and um, athletic, and I loved doing it, and I love watching it. I also really, really admire the work of the Batsheva Company. Um, I think that it's super moving and tells a story through dance that I think um, is really beautiful and really I personally really connect to. Um, I would say that recently there's a choreographer whose name is Akram Khan, who I think is so fascinating and um, theatrical and emotional. So I guess that like for me, the things that I'm most drawn to, Pina Bausch, I think the things that I am most drawn to have a feeling of like uniqueness or a particular voice that is both authentic and specific to that person or group or genre, but also has the ability to connect very deeply to a larger, broader audience, and has a universality to it. Um, I love going to see um, performers that feel fully engaged. And I think that those choreographers require the performers to be their fullest selves. So they are physically present, but they're also taking risks, which means that they're breathing and they're acting and they are experiencing the moment in a very like I keep using this word electric, but it's like I'm drawn to things that feel like spontaneous in the moment. Um, even a really beautiful like traditional ballet piece, like Giselle is my favorite ballet. If it's done in a way that feels um, like it's tapping into like our souls, and where I feel like the performers are taking risks and it feels like unsafe in a way, and not unsafe like in a dangerous way, but like
Yeah,
unsafe, like I don't know, like
like it's a mystery kind of.
it just feels otherworldly, then I'm into it. Um and if it's making me think and feel and engages me emotionally, like that's, so those choreographers that I mentioned, a lot of the time that's why I'm drawn to them and why I feel connected to their work, I think. And
Yes.
also like Akram Khan is like epic. I don't know if you've like we just saw him and his company at or his company, not him, at BAM, and it was like
I've definitely heard of him.
it was so epic and like grand. It was like operatic in its kind of very
Like
different than
so
Pina Bausch, but like, with Pina Bausch, there's like suddenly like rain and and so I love that about her. But with Akram Khan, it was just the sets are huge and the music is intense and the performers are um grand. Like there's just something where they're using every cell of their body, even if
or
they're totally still. So I don't know that I need more movement, but I do. There's something about someone
expression.
being where every cell of their body is vibrating um, and connected.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Expression. All good. So I want to ask, I noticed also it's always a question I've kind of like had in the back of my head, like for like dancers on stage with like singers that I've gone to see. So I noticed like Jennifer Lopez and Ricky Martin on your resume too.
Yeah.
What is it like getting to be part of like shows or performances for these people as a dancer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just looking up that I pronounced Akram's name right. Yes. Um, just wanted to make sure. Uh, you know, it's a very different experience. So like I feel like the theater experience is very different than the concert dance experience, which is very different from the commercial dance experience. Um, in commercial dance, it depends on the particular project that you're doing, um, and the individual that is running it and how they perceive the people that they work with. So I think it's very individual to the person. Um, if you're on tour with, I don't know, name an artist, like if you're on tour with Lizzo, then maybe your tour experience is, and I don't know this because I haven't been on tour with her. I have a friend that's on tour with her, so I could probably ask, but she seems to be someone who is connected to her performers. And so I think that when you have that experience, you are living sort of this, hopefully, this like tour life, which if it's a very well known celebrity large artist, a lot of the times you get put up in like really beautiful hotels, you get to see the world. So on a personal level, you're getting an experience that you're really growing from as an individual. And then when you're performing with someone who, I use Lizzo because I think I just saw some documentary that she did, and it seems like she's involved with their dancers. Maybe it feels like your purpose in the show is a little bit more important or connected, and so you're having more of like a family experience versus just like a you're a part of the puzzle experience. um and in those cases then you're having something that I would consider is closer to a theater experience, because you do build like a small family, and so the performance aspect of it um is more uh emotionally connected. um, and then those shows are bigger, more elaborate
Oh yes.
commercial shows. And so there's a lot of distance for the performer as background. So I would say that the difference for me is that it's even more clear that you are there to support the artist the majority of the time, and that you're a part of the tapestry of what's happening. So it becomes a little bit more technical. It's like these are the steps. I have a performance value that I need to bring to the table. You know, watch out for that pyrotechnic, go
Right.
upstairs, do your change, so it's a little bit different in that way.
Oh, I
Um,
can't imagine. That'd be scary to like have to like, learn the blocking to not run into the fire on stage.
yeah, I mean, they're very safe, and you run through it, and you have a certain distance that you have to keep from certain things, but it's just a bigger like production. And it only happens like you're not doing 8 shows of that a week. You're doing one, two, maybe three, like at most, depending on the tour and depending on the person. So I think that experience, the commercial experience, is very much dependent on the person and how they treat their performers and their dancers, as well as the type of tour that it is. So for me, you know, when I did a couple of things for Lo, it was very early on in her career as a singer. It was like when she came out with On the Six. So things were still very new for her, even though she was established as an actress. And I think she had a couple restaurants at the time and stuff like that. This was kind of new still, and so there was that element of we didn't build that bond or that relationship with her in particular, because there was a lot going on, and she was trying to, I
Navigate.
think, from a distance, like navigate all of the things that were happening, and all of the push that needs to happen in the beginning that is
Oh yeah.
different. It's different, it evolves, right? So like Beyonce's tour now is going to be different than the very first one, in terms of her ability to take up space in the room. Um,
Performance
with
art.
that said, I think like the technical aspect would be that you audition, there's like tons of people there. Um, it's very exciting. There's an excitement and a thrill to it that is very different than any other part of the things that I mentioned. Like there's something about dancing with a musical artist that is, explosive and fun, and like,
Especially someone you
it,
know.
there's a fun element to it that I think is different than, trying to put together a piece like a Bob Fosse musical, where, you're going deep into like the work and the technique and the man himself. This is more like how how well can we entertain, and how can I rise to the challenge of whatever the um, vision for this particular performance is. Um, so it's different. I don't know if that any of that makes sense, but it's just a completely different experience.
Well, I feel like even like on stage with like some giant pop star, like rock star or whatever, like on a stadium tour, if you take away the dancers, it's not fun as an audience member to like go and see this production put on because
Yeah.
it's just like one person on a huge stage by themselves. And
Yeah. I mean, I guess it would depend on like the concept and the artist and so I do think that dancers bring another element to it all when it's appropriate and when it's, done well.
yeah, it's so fun. Like I think of like Taylor Swift stadium tours, which I don't have tickets for this time yet, but like all her dancers I think make a huge impact on like how entertaining her shows are.
Yeah, and she's a good example of somebody. I haven't toured with her, but I have a lot of friends that have. And she's a good example of somebody who really is connected to her performers. And so they do become like a small family.
Yeah.
That changes the experience somewhat because then it's not just about the production or about the entertainment aspect of it. You're also up there sharing the stage with, friends, basically. So it changes the vibe of it a little bit.
Having fun. So you mentioned that Broadway was not in your like initial plan and wasn't in your thought process, but your Broadway debut was in a little show that people might know called Wicked.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in Wicked, first of all, and what did you know about the show at the time that you got involved? Because it was brand new.
Yeah. So my journey to Broadway was that I was working I was focusing on concert work. I had gone to NYU. I was working with Mia Michaels and I was also doing a lot of commercial work. So I was doing, stuff in LA and I was um kind of just like what I would say like gigging and I was so young that I was just kind of going wherever the wind took me. And I was lucky enough that it was consistent enough that I didn't have a plan, if that makes any sense.
Like step by step, day by day.
Yeah, it was like, oh, I'm gonna do, oh, this job came in for the next like month. Oh, this job. And so I was lucky that I was working all the time. And so I didn't, in different areas, right? So like one month I would be working with an artist, or the next month I would do like a couple of industrials, or the next month I would, be working with, rehearsing with like a concert dance company or what, I was just kind of like floating around. But at a certain point in that trajectory, and I can't pinpoint exactly when, Broadway started to shift a little bit, at least from my perspective. And I don't know if this is true or not, but from my perspective, when The Lion King opened,
Oh,
there was a huge influx of modern dancers of color. And so a lot of people in my circle were doing, things like Lion King, Aida crept up. And so I started to talk to or be around friends that were getting consistent paychecks and making a nice living and getting health insurance and doing all of these things that were very appealing as a dancer, especially like, oh, I can do like what I love to do and what I've been trained to do and like make a living. Like, you know, that was like revolutionary to me because I always thought of Broadway as being something that like I just didn't have the training or interest for. um, I also around that time, and I would say like none of it is linear, so it's like
oh
it's
yeah.
not like a month before. It could be like 6 months before, a year before. I also, so first my friends were introducing me to sort of like what they were doing in their world. And then I had worked with Wayne a bunch before that. And he's always been a champion for me. He's known me since I was like, he told me later, which I didn't even know, that he had seen me um, at a bunch of like dance competitions when I was a kid. And
Oh,
he always had an eye out for me, which I didn't know until later when he was like, no, I remember you. You did this number and it was like X, Y, and Z. And I was like, what? Um,
how do you
it's
remember
really
that?
sweet. Yeah, it's really sweet. And so I was in the world of, and I started to like dip my toes into theater auditions. Um, I was lucky when I was 15, maybe older than that. I don't remember. But when I was very, very young, I was working with Mia and she took me out to LA to perform a solo at some event. I don't remember. And after that event, an agent, a well-known agent, asked me if they could represent me. And so I was lucky to have an agent
Wow.
very early on, without knowing what the heck was going on. Like it just kind of happened.
Yeah, that is your like what is an
Yeah,
agent?
so that agent at the time, cut to like a couple years later, she had been helping me with other things, but she started to like say, "Oh, this is going on and like try this and try that." And so it was definitely a learning curve to figure out like, oh, I have to sing and like I've never done that and I have to get a book together and like what does that look like? And God, it was so bad in the beginning. So bad.
Well, you're learning
And
something completely new, so it's like it's a process.
yeah. And so all to say that I end up at this audition for Wicked, I think because everyone and their mother was auditioning, so um, the casting office probably, I think, probably called my agent or my agent submitted me. I don't really know, but I ended up at this call. I also, Corinne has been a longtime friend of mine, so I think that she was looking out for me a little bit. She was Wayne's assistant at the time, and Wayne, of course, knew me. So I think it was like a combination of things that like led me to audition for the show. And then we had like any other show, we had several rounds of auditions where we, danced and sang, and I just booked it. And then I was just there. Um, and then, you learn as you go. Like I remember my first rehearsal was the table read, and
Wow.
I just,
When
I
you
I
like,
had never experienced anything like that in my life, and I was like, wow, I I didn't know that I was stepping into this.
right.
Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna do a show and it'll be like any other gig that I've done, except that there's like actors and singers and whatnot, and this will be
Like,
fun. Like, I was so excited. Like I was so many of my friends had been hired too. So I was going into the project
the
already
preference.
knowing a few people in it. And then the table read happened and Kristen and Adina, I mean, I was like, what is happening? Like,
You
where
were
am
like, am I in this room?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think anybody really had like the foresight to think like that like Wicked was going to become anything at all. Like I don't think it was about that. I think it was more like holy cow, like this is beautiful. Like wow, this is special. I knew that it was special and beautiful in that moment. And what was going to come of it, I have no idea. I mean, there were many points in that process where we thought like the show wasn't going to be good at all. Like there were many points in that process where we
Oh my,
were like actively looking for other work because we were like, this is what's happening. I don't know what's happening here.
to think
And
that
then we
that
opened and it was like a huge hit. And like we had no like people always are like, when did you know it was a hit? I was like, oh, when we opened.
when the applause lasted for like 30 minutes. No, I'm kidding.
No, it was like I think it was pretty soon after that at the stage door. I think that we knew
When
like
people
the
think people
stage door exploded. Um, much to everyone's surprise. And so I think we were like, wow, I guess people like it. Who knew?
how soon did people come to like stage door like and paint themselves
I
in
I
green and
think
stuff?
Oh, paint themselves green? Oh, I don't know. I mean, pretty soon. I mean,
I feel like
pretty
that's
soon
when you know.
after the, yeah, I don't, I can't say that I remember specifically, but I remember that the way that the stage door exploded was like unreal.
Yes. I feel
With
like
a very specific demographic because it was all like preteen to teen girls. You know, there were other people,
my
but it
parents.
it definitely was that at first. Now it's like across the board, but in the beginning it was like that demographic, young women.
Yes. So, what is it about Wicked that you think has made it like, I mean, that you think made it skyrocket, first of all, and become that popular, and that has kept it that popular over all these years? Like, it's still fresh and new, I feel like, every time you see it.
Yeah. Um, I think it's a combination of things. I think that it's a solid book. Um, and the songs are just brilliant and beautiful. Um, and I think that our director Joe, like, it's just like a masterpiece of directing in the way that he weaved everything in and out and made sure that the story made sense. And we went through so many iterations of making sure that um, the story, even though it's a sort of like fantasy, that it still is grounded in a lot of truth and in a lot of humanity that we can connect to. So I always felt, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, this is just my own personal opinion, but I always felt like as a director, and actually Wicked is what got me interested in acting because I was watching the way that they were working, and it was always, you know, very, it was all about truth and all about seeking out like real script analysis, like beautiful work being done about like, oh, we don't need that, we need this, that doesn't make sense, I don't follow this. um I think that it was a really we were given the space collaboratively to um create in that room as well. So, you know, so we've got a great book and great songs. We've got a director who's brilliant and looking for truth in everything that is being done. And that then gives the audience the opportunity to feel like they are inside of it and like they can see themselves into it because truth is truth and it's universal. And that the storyline was tight and that you could follow it and that it moves quickly and that it doesn't, you know, dip at any moment. And then we were given the freedom, whether you were a performer who was a dancer or whether you were a performer that was more of a singer or whether you were one of the leads, you were given permission to play in the room. Excuse me. And so, you know, I remember, I mean, Kristen is like a genius uh comedian. And so
Yes.
a lot of what Glinda does in the show came from Kristen just being
Be-
fun
Yeah.
and allowing herself to be creative in the room. And the same with all the other leads, you know, and um Adina's just like a force, you know, um and then the same with the dancers where I think that Wayne creates a room where no matter what show I've ever done with him, he creates a room where people he trusts you and he lets you know that and is your biggest fan. And so you feel like, you know, there were many moments where he would come up and say, you know, hey, so I got to go fix something over there or like deal with like a moment over there. What I need from you guys over here, like, you know, me and, you know, my dance partner, Andy, let's say, um, he would say something like, on count 8, I need something to explode and I need it to go up. So I need you guys to do some sort of lift that goes up. And then he would say, you good? We'd say, yeah. And then he'd walk away and we would create something that
Wow.
felt right to us. And so, A, it makes it fun and creative, but B, it's also what feels good on your body. So it probably looks better because it's organic to you. Um, And then Wayne just really has a fantastic eye for Wayne and Corinne for, you know, staging and transitioning and keeping the movement um, going and keeping it exciting and keeping it new. Um, so I think like all of those factors and then wrap that in a bow that is about um, not judging a book by its cover, hope, friendship, powerhouse women.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you wrap it into all of those like bigger themes that I think people are really connected to. Um, and I think that all of those things together are, and then like even the costumes, like Susan Hilferty made like brilliant,
The Ozdust costumes are my
insanely
favorite.
gorgeous costumes, lighting. I mean, it's like there's not one peg in the puzzle that is um kind of off. It kind of all, which is, honestly, kind of a miracle when that happens. And it's just sometimes it's serendipitous. You can't plan it. Um, I always put like the directors and sometimes the producers at the top of that list because at the end of the day, they are in charge of saying, even though we have, let's say, like a brilliant costume designer, it still takes the director to say, I like that, but I don't like this. I need that, but we need to edit that. I mean, we had costumes out of town um, that were totally scrapped, that were totally wrong for Ozdust. Ozdust. They're totally different. And then they came up with a totally new concept for Broadway. So it takes leadership and it takes somebody to steer the ship.
Yes.
And then it also takes like a whole village of people that are willing to trust that leader and then also have the creative talent and capacity to fulfill the needs of that particular show.
Yes. It has
It's
to
a
be like
perfect storm of things,
it has to be like simultaneously, I feel like a puzzle piece working together, but also a family.
for sure.
Because like
For
you have
better or
to
for worse. Yeah.
because you have to like have people I feel like when you watch Wicked too, there's something about like you see everyone performing on stage, like love what they're doing and love each other
Mhm.
too,
Yeah.
which kind of goes along with the theme of the show and the and friendship.
Yeah, well, theater is interesting in that way. It's like that synergy is definitely important, even when it's not always, like any really tight, good family, there are moments of discord.
Oh yes.
It's how that discord is handled that I think makes the
Well,
difference. So it's not like it's always like we love each other and it's like a love fest, but it's definitely at that very first company was very, very special. And that's also another like serendipitous moment of um, people coming together at the right place and at the right time. Um, but it's also like the nature of having to be in a show. And sometimes, so I would say that the original cast was very tight. And even when they disagreed or had drama, it still was met with a lot of grace and a lot of humor and like you move on like like when you fight with a sibling or something like that. And then
yeah.
the subsequent like families since then or the subsequent cast members um have been really great and have really like I would say for the most part been inserted into what was built, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
sometimes it's easier if there's a culture that has been built first. Um, if the culture that's been built first is kind of off, then the people that come in have to work harder to change it, if that makes sense. But it was
And
already a culture of like, togetherness, I would say.
yeah, and there's like so much like appreciation within that theater of like everyone who's been in the company of Wicked. Because I worked an event at the Gershwin last year, and like when you go up the stairs, there's like all these people's names who have done Wicked over the years, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yes. So, before I get into dancing, I want to mention 9 to 5 where in your bio it says you got to work with Dolly Parton, which that's iconic.
Yeah.
So, what was that experience like and what brought you to like a more countryside of a
Mhm.
musical?
I had been at Wicked for a really long time and had decided arbitrarily that I was going to leave on my birthday that year.
Ah,
Simply because I just wanted to do something else. I had been there, I think, 2 years at the time, maybe 3 years, something like that. And I was like, I'm kind of ready to try something else. And if I don't put a date on it, I'm just gonna stay here because I was happy there and having a great time. But I felt like artistically I had to do other things. And so this audition came up, and I had auditioned for Andy before. I had known Andy before that, I think. And he had always been so nice, and another sort of like champion, and somebody who would come up to me at auditions and express like that he wanted to work with me, like things like that. And of course Joe, who also directed Wicked, I knew him. And it was also like a feature, like still ensemble, but it was not I got an opportunity to speak and have lines and be a part of like the tapestry a little bit more. So I really wanted to do that because I had started to dip my toes into acting a little bit more once Wicked opened. Um, and so I auditioned for those reasons. To be honest, I didn't know all that much about Dolly. I didn't grow up as somebody who like listened to her music, or I mean, I knew who she was,
yeah, yeah.
obviously, and I knew what some of her songs were, but I didn't really know that much about her, um, her life or her music. So it really wasn't about that for me at the time. It was really more about Andy and Joe and the opportunity to play Maria. Um, and then the other stuff came after. So once I got the job, and once I was in the room with Dolly, and once I obviously did my research and like started to dig deeper into her career and who she is as a person, then, oh my God,
Then
like
you're like, wow,
yes.
what is happening?
Yeah, she's unbelievable, and really quite the leader in the room, and generous, and everything that you think she is, she is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, like, nothing I feel like there's nothing that's not genuine about her when you, like, see her in, like, interviews
Yeah,
and stuff. Yeah.
sure.
So, when you started, like, exploring acting, how did dance help with that?
That's a really good question. I actually think that dancers are like born to be actors, or they have like a sort of, we are actors. Like whether we know it or not, we are acting with our bodies. And we are emoting with our bodies. So it's not like super foreign in that way. And also I think that like a huge part of acting is um being able to like be in your body and be um like experience your physicality, your breath, your ability to flow. Uh, and so I think that dancers have that innately in their training, where actors have to go to movement class, or have to take a movement class, or, have Alexander technique or whatever. Like, I think that dancers come at it from a different like a different vantage point. I think that what we end up having to learn is how to use our voices, because I think that dancers are often taught, the culture of dance is like you don't speak, like you
Like,
just
stay in the
do what I
background.
say, and not that I think that that is a good thing, but a lot of the time it's, dancers are not given permission in the room to express themselves in any way. You just take it. You take the note, you take what you're being told, you take any kind of treatment, good or bad, um, which I hope changes over time. But um,
Yeah.
so learning how to use our voice, learning how to value our point of view and use our um, voice as a way to communicate in a different way, I think is the biggest challenge for some dancers. I wouldn't say every dancer. Um, but I would say that when I started, um, I kind of started it was just fun. Like I wasn't really, I didn't have the pressure of, well, now I'm gonna do this. It was like Kathy Deach, who was in the show with me, she was taking a class with this guy, Matt Corzine, who was teaching Meisner in like a tiny room. He now has like a studio, but in a tiny room just like a couple blocks away. And a couple of us from uh, Wicked as friends just like went for fun. And I loved it. I loved experiencing it from the point of view of like play, which I think was very helpful in retrospect. Not, I didn't think this through, but like in retrospect, I think that stepping into something, anything, from the perspective of play or curiosity or lack of expectation actually opens you up to experience the thing in real time in a way that is more attractive and more fulfilling, at least for me. I think if I had stepped into it thinking like, what do I need to do? And where is this going to take me? And how am I going to do this? And am I good at it? Am I not good at it? Like, I think I would have had like a different trajectory. But for me, it was like, I'm, I'm a dancer who is taking an acting class. At the time, I wasn't thinking
Lord.
that I have to choose one or the other or anything like that. Later, what ended up happening is that I got so interested in the acting and it was starting to become a thing. I got into voiceovers and like started to like book work and do that. Then that started to bring up some questions in the industry that I think are like a whole other podcast. Because I think, or video, I don't know what this
Yeah,
what
yeah.
but I think that going back to dancing, there's a huge disconnect between um, who we think is a worthy performer in terms of taking on certain material or certain work. So it still is. It's not as bad now because I've done a lot of work to help. But in the beginning, it was very uphill to try to tell people, no, I act. Like, I'm not, quote unquote, just a dancer. I'm not a dancer. Because then they put you in this box, right? And it's very difficult for casting directors and people in the business to see you and take you seriously as anything other than that thing. So that was very much uphill. And because of that, I felt like at a certain point I had to choose. And so I started to focus more on the acting and started to say no to some like dance opportunities. But that never really felt totally right to me because I love dance and I love
Yeah,
dancing.
it's
It's a
a part of
specific
you.
part of me. So for me, the journey was, oh, I'm doing this as like, I'm curious about this thing. And then it was like, oh, I love this thing. Oh, I'm not, I have to make this choice, I think, which is not true. But I thought at the time, like, oh, I have to make this choice. So I started to make these choices like, oh, I'm going to be more of an actor. I'm going to focus more on that. I'm going to do more of that. And then cut to like, I don't have to do any of that. I can claim the things that I want to do and put it out into the world that I wear a lot of hats. Now, I say that as if it was like a totally conscious, like easy decision to make, but I think that it happened over small increments over time. And in addition to that, I think that our culture was more accepting of what has now become like a term of, multi-hyphenate. When I was younger, multi-hyphenate didn't exist. That like wasn't a thing.
Like you're one thing or another.
Right. So this current generation has the benefit of being able to use that as part of the, or not use it, but I think there's an acceptance in the culture now that you can be more than one thing. You can, and even not even in the same industry, like you could be an actor and you could, create skincare. Like it's like you can do anything you want now. When I was coming up, that was not really a thing. That was something that I was trying to fight against and tell people, no, you can be a multi hyphenate. Yes, you can do all of these things. And so I
You're like,
think
yeah, I'd
that,
like to be.
right. And I think that like going back to dancing, that's what's most heartbreaking to me about the show is that I'm sad for us, but I'm sad for the dance community at large because I do think that I was hopeful to be a part of something that was a change, right? Like a version of um, look at these people that are able to do more than quote unquote just dance. Look at how viable and entertaining and heartwarming and inspiring this type of person can be. It is possible. Like, so I was excited to be a part of something that said that to the industry and to the community, that wasn't just like worshiping, singers that can belt a high Z only. It's like there's more than that. There's other things, and I think that when you go back in history, the things that were supported and loved the most were performers that were more than that, and sometimes didn't even have those technical abilities. We've gotten to this place where we're like, people have to do these like technical feats in order to be considered quote unquote good, um, or be pigeonholed into like a particular like category or name. And so I think if you look back at like movie musicals and things like that, like you'll see that the people that are most interesting and the most that you can connect to the most, I think, are people who just have that like human sparkle. And sometimes that
Multi-talented.
doesn't look like the 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 norm these days, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Like multi-talented, like singing in the rain.
That it doesn't need to be defined. It doesn't, you don't need to define that like in order to be worthy of acceptance, you have to have this many followers or hit this note in particular or, do 47 turns. Like that might be possible and that's awesome if you have all of those things. That's
Like amazing.
bonus, right? But also there is a life and a artistry that goes beyond those things. And I think that as audiences, we need to be more critical about what we support and what we want to connect with and see. So I, for one, for example, don't always want to go see a show where everything is exploding at me, where the set is huge and the costumes are amazing and the performers are nailing it, but like it looks
Like,
perfect.
yeah.
Sometimes I want to go, I mean, the reason I love live theater and going back to the question about what dances outside of theater do you like, it's that um I'm going to use that word again, electricity. There's something that happens
So true.
when it's more pure and less refined and finesse and perfected out of a need to be safe and palatable. So a lot of the times shows are beautiful to look at and they're technically proficient, but they're also very, very safe. Um, I would prefer, when audiences leave dancing, and I see them and they come up to me, there's so many layers of emotions going on for every particular person, depending on who I've talked to. And that's something that I did not experience in other shows where people feel like they've been seen or they're emotionally touched or like they want to go home and dance or they have questions about all kinds of things, or where people that are non-binary come and they see Colton and they're like, "Oh my God, like I didn't know that that was like that I'm on stage. Like what's happening?"
So much representation within the show too. Yeah.
Right. And I think that those things are vital and important and again, electric. So if you're walking out of a theater and you're feeling like I'm thinking about something or in a very different way. I worked on Top Dog Underdog at the beginning of the year on the associate director side, and that was a very similar feeling for me, and it had nothing to do with dance or musical theater. It was a straight play, but you hopefully, and I think the majority of people walked out of there like in a state of like, I need to talk. I need to digest this. I need to process this. I'm moved by it. I feel, you know, connected and like there's a part of me that understands something a little bit better. So to me, those kinds of productions and those types of performers are what I personally want to see. Sometimes I don't want to see the perfect high Z or 87 turns if I'm not feeling anything.
Yes.
So that's a super long-winded way of answering your question, but um, I think that it's vital and really, really important.
Well, I think that also like brings up a good point. I think that that's why people like seeing understudies nowadays too a lot on stage because like when you go to a performance and an understudy or like a standby who isn't normally on is performing, you like see this like new spark to the show
Yes, absolutely.
stage, which is really cool.
For sure.
So I want to ask, do you think as I mean, as in everything, like as both actor, dancer, someone who works behind the scenes, do you think that shows that are televised, like these dance shows that are televised, like Dancing with the Stars and stuff, and So You Think You Can Dance, have and will continue to maybe help the narrative of dance become like more like these people can do anything. They're not just dancers, but they can act and sing and do other stuff too.
Oh, that's a loaded question. I have a lot of thoughts about that. Um,
I feel like Julianne Hough has kind of like done all of the things in recent years. So that's where that
yeah,
comes from.
yeah, I think that it's hard to figure out, and I think that everyone's going to have a different opinion about this. For me, I think that having dance and dancers out in the world is never a bad thing. And I love that people at home can experience it and be inside of it and learn some, stories from it. I think that where we get in trouble is that when it becomes a commercial endeavor and we are selling viewership,
The
it
production.
does taint the experience. So I would say that it's like there's some really great stuff that comes from it. And I think that there's some not great stuff, if I'm honest, that comes from it. I think that going back to our previous conversation, now are we actually educating audiences about what they should truly expect, or are we sensationalizing it? So are we taking these stories and making them more dramatic? Like, are we
Reality
are we
TV.
focusing on the reality TV aspect, or are we actually looking at dance critically. And I think that there is a disservice that happens for audiences when they think that what they are sometimes watching, they're being told that it's good, right? So if a network or if a show or whatever is pushing a particular performer because their story is better and it's going to be better viewership, but their um, maybe their performance quality and technique is still in the works, or like maybe there's someone else who's just like a better, I hate to use better, but just like everyone is at a different place at different times, right? And not everybody could be amazing at the same time. I've certainly had times in my life where I'm not in shape or I'm not whatever, and that's okay, right? But I think that we
Yeah.
have to be careful in the TV and in the social media world when we are telling people what to think as supposed experts in the field. Um, because we run into a little bit of, and I know this because I've talked to people that are like not in the industry that are like, oh, I loved X or I thought this was amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but
That's because you're being
that's
told.
a trick, like, yeah, so they did, going back to our conversation, 47 turns, but like their foot wasn't pointed. They were spinning, not turning. I felt nothing because they were busy being told that those 47 turns were important. So it's not about the performer. The performer, unfortunately, is delivering what they think is needed of them, right? So it's about giving the performers permission as well to like be themselves and show themselves in the work. But we're putting so much pressure on performers to do what the commercial world wants to sell, that I think that it can be a trap. Um, I love Dancing with the Stars. I think it's super fun. Um, that's a different show altogether.
Oh yeah, because it's like all the like, it's very. I feel like at the end of the day, not reality because it is produced. Like the producers are at the core of a lot of the decisions, which
Right.
then loses its reality aspect.
Yeah. So I think I would say that, like, to answer your question, I think that shows or experiences, because it can be social, it can be YouTube, it can be whatever, shows that um, try to capture what dancers actually do authentically are more appealing to me than shows that are trying to sell an idea or a story, because I think that that can get dangerous, and it's person by person. I wouldn't say that it's across the board. It's certainly given a lot of talented choreographers a vehicle to be seen. It's given a lot of dancers a vehicle to be seen. It's given a lot of households uh, ideas into like dance exists in the world and we should celebrate it and we should move and look how fun it is. Like there's a lot of joy and beauty and goodness in it too. It's just that I worry about a culture that isn't thinking critically as an audience already, not being like enforcing that versus talking about like the idea that like dancers are athletes and the amount of work and sacrifice and dedication that goes into it, and how to discern between, a performance that is maybe not as refined as another based on artistic qualities and technique versus tricks and glitz. And when you watch, you mentioned Singing in the Rain, when you watch Gene Kelly, like
You're like, wow.
it's like I tell my son all the time, I'm like, what do you like about it? Like, let's talk about it, because I think it's important for That's what I mean. It's like I think that there we are not teaching our kids or our audiences about, the things that you learn when you are a student in those fields, where you're asked to look at things critically and think about them and compare them one to the other. Some of it is subjective, right? Like some of it is like I liked it and maybe the person next to me didn't like it, but we can both agree on certain elements, right?
Yes.
Um, and so it's a long-winded way of saying, like, I think it's a complicated thing that we're still figuring out.
Definitely. And I highly suggest, like, for people who watch those shows, honestly, to like, because you did mention like dancers are athletes, and it's cool to not only watch those shows, but to also like follow the dancers on like social media and see the behind the scenes of like what they do, like
The real behind the
their
scenes.
first. And
Although social, it's not really real, but at least you get a glimpse. Hopefully you're following people who are a little bit more transparent than
yeah,
others. But I think
well,
it's important to also understand, like, you know, what you are seeing out in the world is also fabricated to a degree.
yes,
So I would go a step further and say, if you're interested, I would say go see as much as you can.
yes,
Go and see it live, go and experience it live, go and take classes. If you can't take classes or are not interested in taking classes, then find programs where, like, I think talkbacks are really informative. I think
okay.
speaking to an actual performer is really important. And just like trusting your own gut. Like, I talk to people a lot that are like, when I ask them, like, well, I love to go to the theater with people that are like not in the business because I like to know what they think. And it's
It's like a
interesting.
fresh opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that a lot of the time they feel like they should say something. So they usually answer questions from the perspective of like, I think I'm trying to tell you something that I'm supposed to be saying because I think what I've been told I'm supposed to like, oh, that moment in the show was like really spectacular. And then when I say, did you really think it was spectacular? Like, what did you find about it? And then we dive a little deeper. Then you find out that they're like, I didn't get it. And you're like, right. So just trust that. Trust that, like, you didn't get it, but you're being fed the narrative that bigger is better, more information is better, more turns are better, more height is better. Like, that's not always necessarily better. It can be,
The
you know,
technique.
but you have to be able to discern that, I think. And to give ourselves permission to critically think about what we like and what we support. I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday that's in the business, that we were having this very same discussion about, like, just because it's like this elaborate thing and this expensive showcase doesn't make it good.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's everything coming together, honestly.
Yeah. And it can make it good. Like Wicked is a good example of, like, that is a big show with a lot of amazing things. There's lots of high notes and technical things. Like, that is it's splashy, but it works.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of heart, and it all comes together. But there are other situations where I think we need to be able to say as an audience, this it doesn't work. I'm not going to keep buying these tickets for these particular productions that are telling me that they're good based on all of this extra, right? So we need to be more critical about, oh, I went to see this thing and it was good. I didn't love it. And it's okay to say that, because I think that that's how we are able as a community to grow the culture and evolve the culture. And so right now with Dance and Close In, I'm on this like soapbox because I do think that people have come to see a show that they really love and really enjoy, And it's important to talk about that and to have if you're a person who's choosing what show am I going to see, right? Like you've got 5 or 6, 7, 10, 20 shows that you're
Fun.
looking at on the roster, right? And you have friends who are in the theater and you're all trying to decide like what you're going to see. I would say like take a step back and make sure that you're making a decision that's based on the quality of the experience that you're going to have, and that it's not dictated by the size of the glitz or the name above the title.
Yep.
If the name above the
Especially
title
the
happens to be moving you, that's fine. I don't have anything against that. I just think that it can't be the only thing. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to go see, like, to use a really
name.
random name, like, I don't know, Beyonce in X show because it's Beyonce. It's like, well, she's awesome, but
But yeah.
are you going to see that show and that person in that show and you're ready for that experience? Or are you only making that decision based on that name? It's a nuanced thing, right?
Are you gonna actually enjoy the show, or are you just going because you
Right.
want to?
Like if everyone's told you that the show is not succeeding, which honestly is most of the time because it's a very difficult thing to do well, and takes a lot of things to be in line, and that's why it's beautiful and incredible and worth doing. But if you know already that something isn't necessarily working, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't go support it or should go see it. It's just what I'm saying is like I just want people to think more. And sometimes there's no thinking. I'm not even going to think about what the other options are because this is the name I'm going to see. And I'm saying go see the name if you're interested in what that name is doing in that show. But don't just blindly be like, I don't know anything about this show. I'm just going to go see so and so. It's like, I want more from people.
Yeah,
I just want people to
critical
like
thinking.
have a more complete, thoughtful experience than just the commercial selling of things.
And I think the people like above, like yeah, like the names on these billboards, like yeah, they want to see people coming for them, but also they want people to like truly appreciate the art at the end of the day too.
Yeah, and I do think that it's messy and sloppy, right? At first, trying to navigate like because it's not so simple as like celebritydom being like, an issue. I think that it's important. We have to sell tickets, right? We want to keep the theater alive. People are interested in watching, their favorite actor or whatever do a thing. I think that that's important and a part of it, right? But the nuance comes into like, to what degree do we only rely on that?
You can't just depend on that. Yeah.
You know, um, and then making sure that we as audiences help shape the culture and that we support the things that really move us and that we have critical conversations about what works and doesn't work for each individual, which is going to be totally different because in the end that's going to help shape what we see on stage. I think that people, especially in this country, are getting so, and I understand, right? Because the tickets are so expensive that you want to feel like you've had an experience, right? And so I think that someone who's maybe been saving their money to come see a show maybe is like, well, when I go to see Wicked or when I go to see Lion King or when I go to see Harry Potter or any of the Disney shows, I'm sort of guaranteed this feeling that it was quote unquote worth it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's why plays have a hard time because audiences are having trouble um, feeling like it's enough to have a theatrical experience that is intellectual and moving in your heart. It's like they want to see, they want to feel like I saved these $200 and it better be a spectacle. I don't care if the show is terrible. And so in this country, I think that we are getting very much in the sort of like in the habit of expecting more and more commercial selling. Um, and my hope is that the theater starts to find a way in which we can not get too far in that direction. But I think that it starts with the audiences and the audiences being a little bit
Like open, probably.
more critical thinking, more open, more looking for more of an experience internally than an experience like externally.
Then an
And that
experience.
they're able to decipher that. Sometimes I'm not sure that they're able to decipher that because of everything that we're being fed from everything in this country, right? Like everything in this country is like the bigger the better. Like, you need a burger that's like 10 stacks high. Like, like things like that. So, I that's my hope. My hope is that audiences can start to shape the culture a little bit because if not, I don't think we're going to survive because there's only so much that you can do before it's not um before you can't afford it in any way. Um the people making it and also the people seeing it.
Yeah,
So it starts to become prohibitive to people that want to see it, and it becomes prohibitive to people that want to produce it because you can't tackle, these massive productions that I don't think are necessary every time. It's hard to compete with something like Disney, let's say.
it is.
And that's
Especially,
not to take anything away from Disney. I'm taking my son to every single Disney show. He loves them. I love them. I think they're spectacular. But I also think there's otherness
there's so
that
much
needs
more.
to be supported.
Yes, there's so much more. And I love Disney too. So I'm like a
Yeah.
Disney kid.
Oh, me
So,
too. Oh, it's the best.
oh my gosh, it's always magical and makes you feel good. And
Oh, yeah.
like, what else do you
And
want?
they
Like,
have the money to be able to produce things like that. So,
yeah.
you know, it's just hard to compete with that. That's all.
And inspires the next generation too, I feel like as well.
Yeah.
So before wrap up,
Oh,
I
and to answer your question about because you mentioned like musicals being taped um for like live tapings or whatever. I have mixed feelings about that as well. I think that on one hand, I love that it gives access to a
everyone.
lot of people that would not have access otherwise. So in that way, I think it's beautiful and brilliant, and I think it should be made even more accessible than it currently is because it's still being commercialized to the extent that some people still can't see it. So that aspect of it, I think, is really important. The flip side to that is that I think that no matter what you do, it does not translate. So
No,
no matter what,
I
it
had
could potentially be doing a disservice by having people that don't know theater have access and then say,
well, yeah, yeah. Because I honestly, people were talking. I hadn't seen Hamilton for the longest time, and I saw it on Disney Plus, and I was like, well,
yeah,
really like a live theater experience. And I'm like, I'm gonna just turn this off. I probably have to see this in person. And when I saw it in person, I loved it.
yeah. So I think that that's the part that can be a little like, oh, it concerns me to have somebody have that experience because then they'll come to Broadway and say, either I'll just watch that when they do it on Netflix, or they'll say, I really didn't have I don't get it.
Yeah,
I saw that show. I guess I don't like musical theater. Or I guess I don't like theater. Or I get, like I want to give people the opportunity,
To come see it live.
yeah, to experience it.
Yeah, which is, I mean, yeah,
You know, it's
music.
a three-dimensional art form, like in a two-dimensional space. So it just doesn't translate. It's the same
Yeah,
thing with dancers. You know, it's like when you there's whole like semesters now on filming for dance because it's such a particular thing because it's impossible to capture dance on film if it's not done particular in a particular way.
yeah. I mean, live theater, it's musical theater, live theater, it's called live theater for a reason,
Right.
honestly. Before I wrap up, I want to ask, where can people follow you on social media to keep up
Yeah.
with you and get more inspiration from you? Because, like, wow, I can't wait to put this out and for people to listen,
Yeah.
because I've just been like taking everything in and been like so like thinking about what you have to say. And I'll probably be thinking about this conversation literally all weekend.
Yeah, I actually was just thinking about restructuring. I mean, my niece like call it so old, but I really enjoy the interactive aspect of it and the conversation aspect of social media and being able to like learn from what other people think and to have critical conversations. Like I think it's important in that way. So they can across all platforms, although I don't really use Twitter. I'm very rarely Facebook, and I go on Pinterest, but I don't use it as like a social app. Um, I'm pretty active on Instagram, and that would be my full name. So it's at Ioana, another A for my last name. So it's a double Alfonso. So it's at Ioana Alfonso. And then my website, you can find me on there too. And I think there's a way to like input your in the next couple of months. I plan to put out like newsletters and stuff like that. You can do I think that not I think. Let me look. God, I should be better at this. Yeah, so it's my full name. It's ioanaalfonso.com.
Yes. And oh my gosh, it's so well done.
Oh, thanks. It needs I need a redo. Um
No,
custom
but
in the next 4 months. But I'm hoping to make it more of a behind the scenes. Like lately I've just been interested in really having more of like a human experience because a lot of my website material in the past has been more of like a resume, like, oh, here's all, you know, the information that you need to know about me for work purposes. But I think I'm gonna redesign it in a way that lets you into like the process a little bit more and then allows you to like ask questions and stuff like that. Because I think that I really want to focus on just connecting with people more. Um, and so it'll be like, you know, if you click on Dancing or Top Dog or whatever, it'll open up into like kind of like a dollhouse where you'll see photos and, you know, thoughts that I've had about that particular production. And then hopefully people can like give feedback like, oh, I didn't think about this, or what if this happened, and maybe we can all collaborate and create stuff together. So for me it's about like the human connection a little bit more. So I want to do that more than just like world where we're all like, look at my perfect life.
right. It's like
Like,
so yeah.
this is not it. Like, let's talk about the real stuff. You know, there's a
People
lot of
can,
failure, a lot of disappointment, a lot of process that goes on, and I think that's way more important and way more interesting to let people know that they're not alone and that we're all like literally the same.
yes. So I want to wrap up with the dancing question. So how has Bob Fosse's choreography like inspired and influenced you as, I mean, a person?
Yeah. Oh God, in so many ways. I would say the mind, although like my brain is exploding with things. I would say that doing his work. has been mostly about uh, being truthful. There's something about the way that he choreographs and what his movement requires to do well that requires the performer. I think this is why it's so difficult. It's very exposing, right? So if you are, even if it's something as minimal as like a shoulder roll or a wrist, if you are just doing the movement, it doesn't work. It doesn't translate. It's kind of boring. But if you are connected to it on a energetic, spiritual, emotional level, and you understand where that movement is coming from as a person and as an actor, then it works, right? So it's grounded me and forced me to build the muscle of truth. And along with that, so truth, then is like the umbrella for like, in order to be truthful, then I have to trust that I am enough,
Yeah.
that I don't have to put extra on it. I don't have to make it something that it's not. I have to trust that I am enough. I have to trust that the material is enough. I have to be truthful within the material. And I also have to give myself grace when it feels off, because that's just part of it too, right? Like, part of what I love about this show and what we always talk about as a group is that no one performance is like the other. And so there's a constant shift of where you are that day, both physically and as a human being, right? Like, we're all the instrument, right? And so his work has really enforced that aspect in me, that movement can live in a place that is just, I guess, just that reminder that that we as performers, that I am enough,
Yeah.
that like
Well,
what I bring to the table, as long as it's truthful, is impactful and beautiful and um, worthy of expressing. Um, that, and then I could talk about like a gazillion other things about
oh my
risk,
gosh, yes.
storytelling, and like a bunch of other things, but that one to me is the one that every day I go out on the stage and I think has been a consistent, um I wouldn't say challenge, although maybe challenge is the right word, like a consistent um thing to tackle, is like, Wayne always says that to us. He's like, you don't have to perform this. It's actually the total opposite. Fosse, a lot of Fosse's work, like, his head is down, and it's because he didn't want to look outward. He was always feeling inward. So I think that is a beautiful challenge. Is, how truthful and honest can you be about who you are in the movement, and not
Yes.
anybody else or any picture that you're supposed to be supposedly making. I think that we're told to think of Fosse from the perspective of like what people think it is, which is like, the black bowler hat and the versions of Chicago that we've seen, or the
Yeah.
versions of Fosse that we've seen. But if you really do your research back and you um, look up the work that he's done, it's extremely versatile, and the through line is like this truth, this like, every performer is different, and every performer, hopefully, if they're doing it in a way that feels good to you as an audience, probably because they're inside it. And
Yes.
so for me, it's like I just want to consistently be inside myself as a performer, um, not in a selfish way, but in a way that allows me to then be in a state of flow that I can give it all away. Um, without holding on
You can share and like
to it in a
inspire.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can share it without like a sense of like it's like ultimate it sounds like it would be full of ego, but it's actually I think opposite because you're just hopefully getting to a place where there's so much acceptance that it's not just accepting like that you're good at something, it's also just saying like this is where this lives right now within the context of what I need to do, but it's okay great like it feels different today and that's okay, and it may be, you know, it may be uncomfortable, it may not, it may throw you off, and that's okay too. It's all very beautiful and in the moment. And that way, someone in the audience can be let in because, you know, unlike social media, our lives are not always like shiny and glossy. Like sometimes people need to be let into a little bit.
Yeah. It's a way to express like what you're going through every day, I feel like, just like being up there.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and like offering so much
Having me.
inspiration. Your passion for like everything is amazing. Thanks for watching this episode of Backstage with Becca B. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Becca B Talks TV. Or for more exclusive content from this interview and more, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Backstage with Becca B. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give me a 5-star rating. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!